Conversations Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations Podcast. And we're coming at you from Wurundjeri Land here in Melbourne. My name is Fatih, and I'm the Head of Training at All Graduates Interpreting and Translating Services. If you like our podcast, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to receive notifications for new podcast episodes and free webinars. Before I introduce my guest today, I just want to quickly talk about our topic. So a few years ago, NAATI introduced two new credentials, the Certified Specialist Health Interpreter and the Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter credentials. Today, I have with me 4 guests, and we're going to be talking about these new specialist credentials. Let me start by introducing today's very esteemed guests. So first up, I have Aurélie Sheehan, the Certification Policy and Development Manager from NAATI. Hi, Aurélie.
Hi, everyone.
And you're no stranger to this podcast, are you?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Very good. And again, from NAATI, we have Vicky Wong, who's the Development and Training Team Leader. Hi, Vicky. Welcome, and thanks for joining today.
Hello, everyone.
And I have 2 amazing people here. I have Silvia Martinez, the Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter. Hi, Silvia.
Hello.
And I have Lynn, Geng, who is Certified Specialist Health Interpreter and Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter. So I think the only one to hold both credentials for the time being. See
Hi,
what happens.
everyone.
Hi, Lynn. Welcome.
Hi.
And I just want to say to Silvia and Lynn, you are some of Australia's first specialist interpreters.
I know. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
So,
It's pretty cool.
Pioneers. So we're going to be talking about your experiences with the whole test and how you prepared. But first, let's ask Aurélie. Aurélie, why these new credentials? I mean, we've had the recognised practicing certified interpreter, certified provisional interpreter. What brought the specialist on? Why were they introduced?
Well, that's a very good question, Fatih. Look, that was the result of a long process of consultations that started in 2012 with the improvement to NAATI testing, which also resulted in the current certification system. So it involved a number of consultations with practitioners, our examiners, also language service providers, academics, and educators. So that took a number of years, at least around 5 years, because we launched the certification in 2018, the certification system in 2018. So as part of this work, which resulted in the improvement to NAATI testing report available on our website, if you're interested, there was a number of research that was done, some research that was done, especially looking at other international systems and other certifications available around the world where specialization were part of this. And there was, from the consultation, a really strong support to recognize the higher level of certification, especially in different specialist domains like health, legal, but also business and conference. And so as a result of all this work, there was a number of recommendations that were presented in the report. And one of them was around having a high level of certification, specialist certification, And so we adopted some of those. And as you mentioned, we have now a certified specialist interpreter test for the health domain and one for the legal domain. And of course, we've also introduced conference interpreting, which is not the topic of today. And it was already available under accreditation, but that was part of that exercise. And so basically, we've been running those since 2019 now. Yeah.
Magnificent. So can you tell us a bit about the process? How long did it take you to design and develop these tests and then to implement them? And who was involved with the design and development? Can you give us a bit of background information?
Sure thing. So as I've mentioned, we ran the first specialist test in 2019. That was late 2019. We actually started the development process in late 2018. So it took us about a year before we were able to make these available, which, in hindsight was pretty quick turnaround. So by development here, we mean basically designing the test specification. So what is the test going to look like? So all the task formats. And then it includes the assessment rubrics as well. And as part of this development process, there are also piloting stages. So we had some small pilots as well to make sure it's working. So it's a bit of an engineering process sometimes what we do. And so it took us about a year before we were able to have our first candidate sit the test. Look, I won't go through all the small steps that we undertake to make those tests possible, but what I can say, it's a very complex process. It involves a range of experts, not only highly qualified staff like Vicky, who's present here, and our examiners, but it also involved lawyers, medical practitioners, speech pathologists. So there's a range of stakeholders involved in the creation of those tests. So they were involved at the beginning when we created the test formats, but also in the development of test tasks as well. So it is extremely complex. And because of that, it generally takes a little bit of time to have new languages available and new test tasks available. Generally, we look at about 6 months to a year to have a test in a new language available. And why? Because there are two components to the test, and I won't go in details on this now. I'm sure we'll cover that later in the podcast. But there's a knowledge test which needs to be developed, and there are also interpreting tasks which are specific to. They are the two directions, but we need to work with our examiner panels for that, for the load aspects, and also with our experts for the complexity level. So, and on top of that, when we've got test tasks that are developed, we need also to film or record those tasks. And so that's an extra layer of logistics and complexity. So these things take time to develop.
That's very understandable. Before I go to Vicky, and who's going to give us more detail about what the test involves, I just want to ask you something about the examiners. Now, we know that these specialist certifications are the first of their kind. Yeah. And all previous certifications and accreditations before that, they all had their inauguration. There was always the first time a language was tested. Before it's tested, there's no one actually certified in the examiners. So who marks these first inaugural candidates?
Yeah, a very good question. Look, what we've been doing was to work towards creating an examiner panel, in spite of the test being the first, specialized test ever. The ideal candidate really, especially now, would hold a specialist certification. We always ensure that our examiners are certified practitioner. That's a condition number one. So the ideal candidate would hold this certification. They would have extensive interpreting experience in the domain of specialization, so here health or legal. And they also need to demonstrate experience in training and assessment, in translation and interpreting. So these are like the key elements. Now, obviously, for those first tests, because they were the first time ever, we didn't have specially certified examiners. So the key factors here are the level, the breadth and depth of specialization in the field. So we're looking for experts in the field. They would hold a level of certification, and we would be looking at certified or conference, depending on the language. So we'd be looking at the highest level of certification that is available in this particular language. What would make the difference is the level of we would be looking for experts in the field. So they have demonstrated experience in the health sector, in the legal sector. Maybe some of them already hold qualifications in those domains on top of their interpreting experience. So we'd be looking at that really high level of expertise so we can match the level of complexity of the test and knowledge needed.
Some of them could be academics with publications in the specified area.
That's right.
So on.
Yeah. So that's how we started. Obviously, now that we are running these tests regularly, we also work towards having our examiners sit those tests as well at some point in time so they can hold that specialist certification. Obviously, if they do, they are not involved in setting their own test materials. They would be excluded from that whole process, and they would sit the test just like any other candidate.
And I can attest to that.
Well,
that's right.
Now that you have specialist interpreters, they'll probably become examiners, and then they will examine the examiners who examine them.
Yeah, it is. It is complex, and the thing is, the pool is very small, so we do have to make compromises as well. And our goal is always not to compromise the quality and what we're trying to achieve. So we will do everything we can to make sure we keep that integrity, either with our examiners, with how we select them, how we test them, so we can really uphold that standard, which is now that specialist certified standard.
Magnificent. I want to throw this question to Vicky. Vicky, I know you've been involved in this from the start. What does the test involve? Now, Aurélie briefly touched on it. There's a knowledge component and an interpreting component. Can you please give us a bit more detail on what this test is?
No problem. I mean, that's actually my favorite topic. So as Aurélie has mentioned, knowledge test component plus an interpreting test component. And the knowledge test component is actually a screening task, and candidates will have to pass the knowledge test in order to be eligible for the interpreting test. So the knowledge test is a written test of 60 questions in 4 parts. And the types of questions are multiple choice, which is part 1, match or drag and drop questions in part 2, short answer questions in part 3, and scenario-based questions with a mix of all question types, which is part 4. The knowledge test assesses candidates' legal or medical knowledge on a very broad range of topics. For example, there are questions about legal medical terminology or general legal or medical knowledge. It also has questions on ethics, culture, and the role of interpreter in the legal or health settings, as well as questions on advanced interactional management, as well as research and preparation. And then in regard to the interpreting test, it consists of 4 interpreting tasks involving complex and highly specialized communications. The tasks deal with high-level interactions between specialists or between specialists and well-informed lay speakers in different areas of the health domain or the legal domain. Apart from the usual monologue task, as in the certified interpreter test, in the specialist interpreter test, there are new task types. For example, in the legal interpreter test, there is a simulated cross-examination scenario, which we called dialogic extracts task. In the health interpreter test, there is a disjointed speech in the area of mental health. In both legal and health interpreter test, there is a monolingual exchange task involving 3 English speakers, in which candidates interpret the exchange from English into Lote using the simultaneous mode. I'm not going into the details of the test, but candidates will be able to find all the information from NAATI's website.
Silvia, we heard about the test. It all sounds, pretty straightforward, knowledge test, and then a bit of simultaneous, a bit of consecutive. How hard was it?
A bit of long consecutive as well.
A bit of long consecutive.
A fair bit of long consecutive.
How hard was it? You're a very, very experienced interpreter, and you're also a conference interpreter. You're an interpreter trainer. You wear many hats. Today, you're here as a certified specialist legal interpreter, but we know you wear many hats. For someone who's as experienced as you, did you find the test hard?
I found it very challenging. Absolutely. Yeah. With the knowledge test, for example, I can't remember right now what the length of time was, but I think it's about 3 hours. And what I do remember is that I kind of went through and I completed it, but went through, flagged some questions that I had answered, but I kind of wanted to go back on, and got the time to do those, to review those things that I had flagged. But I think I submitted the final thing about 4 seconds before the system would have submitted for me. And that was an indication of the level of thought. And so I did find it challenging, but not impossible. So just in listening to Aurélie and to Aurélie talking about all of the work that goes into the setting of the tests, and what the thought and effort that needs to go into it. I actually wrote to the info@NAATI email as when I finished that test, because I thought that both the English setting and the Spanish panel in my case had done an excellent job of setting tasks that were very challenging, but that is the reality. Right? Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the reality of the work that we do at a specialised level.
Being challenged at that specialised level, did you feel good as an interpreter to see that, there is another level there for me that's challenging me? I'm aspiring for the next step. Did it give that kind of a feeling to you?
Yeah, the completion of the test. I mean, it had been many, many years since I'd actually proved knowledge and skills in this area through testing. In my case, I actually was accredited in the old system in the late 90s. And then, and that was, I had gone in at the what was then the paraprofessional level, and then went to did the professional tests as well. But it was well over 20 years since I'd kind of had to demonstrate these skills through a testing process. So there was a sense of, in Spanish, you actually talk about the respect that you have for something, when it's kind of, that it is indeed going to be a challenge. But yeah, look, once I knew that I had passed and I had some, it wasn't one of those places, it wasn't one of those situations where I walked away thinking, yeah, I've done it. It was like, well, let's wait for the feedback. But once I knew that I had passed, I felt very, very happy that had been the case.
How long did it take for you to get the feedback?
The feedback actually doesn't take that long. It was within a couple of months, I think. I think it's within 8 to 10 weeks that results come back, and that in both cases, that's what happened. There was a big lag between my knowledge and the interpreting test. I think because of COVID. In the meanwhile, there was a bit of having to rearrange things, and I believe some difficulty in actually getting some of the recorded material for the interpreting test. So there was a relatively significant delay. I think I was meant to sit the interpreting test in September of one year, and ended up sitting it in February of the next, or something like that. But once I had sat the test, the actual feedback was, within that normal process, which I think is within the 2 months. And with some good, thinking of the interpreting test in particular, with some good feedback as well about, particularly, there was one task in particular that I knew had been particularly challenging in the interpreting test, or where my performance wasn't what I would have liked it to be within that interpreting test. And particularly for that task, the feedback that I received from the examiners was really good, and actually made me think about, it made me aware of certain practice habits or whatever that I wasn't fully aware of until then, and that I've since worked on improving. And this is, as someone who, I have been around for a while, I do interpret very regularly. I am a good interpreter. And even in that case, even I think this is one of the professions, I think all professions actually, just require that continuous improvement and that self-awareness of things. And this, going through this process, was actually an interesting awareness raising exercise, as well as the saying, tick, I've done it. I have this different this new certification.
Magnificent. Vicky, correct me if I'm wrong. There's been like small updates to the knowledge test as well. So that gap between knowledge test to interpreting test is probably shortened because of that update too, I guess, right?
So the updates is we have removed the heavy writing bit in the knowledge test. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, in the 4 parts, we no longer have essay questions, which takes a lot of time. In terms of the gap or the wait time between the knowledge test and the interpreting test, at the moment, we are still having 1 round of each test every year because it takes time to develop materials, and we have to make sure we have materials ready for the candidates. But of course, we are looking to improve and to make the gap smaller down the track. But at the moment, we are still having 1 round of knowledge test and 1 round of interpreting tests each year.
So can we say these first round of specialist interpreters are extra specialist interpreters because they did the long essay questions?
Of course they are.
Look at us, Lynn. We can put a new letter.
Yes, exactly.
With the ECSLI or ECHA.
I like it. We've got the certification manager here, so if that's okay, you can just put that in front of your name, right?
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Lynn, look, you are Australia's first interpreter to hold both the legal and the health specialist credentials, right? I looked at the NAATI directory and you are literally the only one, right? Aurélie, is that right? No one so far?
I think so, yes. Vicky?
Definitely.
So, you are also a very experienced interpreter. I want to ask you from another point of view. Now, I asked Silvia, I said, was it difficult? Was it challenging? I want to ask her from a more human point of view from you, about your feelings. We know how challenging these tests can be, but we also know how nerve-wracking these tests can be, right? How were your feelings about the test, like coming up to the test and then during the test? Were you nervous?
I was quite stressed out. If I could go back a little bit to talk about my journey working as an interpreter, I think that would better answer this question. So when I first started working as an interpreter, I was super excited and confident because at that time I just finished my master's degrees at UQ. So I already had 6 years of professional training under my belt, just a focus on interpreting and translation. So I was confident, I was excited, I was saying to myself, I'm ready, let's make some noise,
Bring it on.
Because being an interpreter has always been my dream job. It's the one thing I want to do. But I, looking back, I think I was a little bit ignorant because, you don't know what you don't know. And being ignorant, actually, I think sort of protected me, made me fearless a little bit, in that way, because I was just, doing all of the jobs, legal jobs, health jobs. But as I accumulate my, experience and working more jobs, projects, I just realized that the more I know, the less I know. It always pushed me to be better, to know more, to expand my knowledge bank, and also to raise the bar higher for myself. But at the same time, I developed this imposter syndrome. The worst episode I had was actually in 2019. I was engaged by Queensland Health to interpret for several groups of Chinese delegations coming here to do medical training, professional development training. So these people are just doctors, specialists with 30 plus years of clinical experience. So they are here to talk with their Australian counterparts. So you can imagine that the language, how they talk, wouldn't be the lay English, in a community setting, how a doctor would talk to a patient. So at that time, I just knew that I needed to prepare. maybe even over prepare to, feel the calm, to calm my own nerves. So I prepared for a month, but I was still very anxious. I remember like during that month, I cried 3 times, like one simple medical condition would just throw me into this rabbit hole, with more knowledge to study. And I lost 4 kg. I was so stressed about it. I was like, how could I do justice to these brilliant speakers, doctors from China? I don't want to restrict themselves because I don't know that term or I don't have the background information. So I prepared and I summoned all of my courage and showed up for the 2-week interpreting project, and I actually received quite positive feedback from the doctors, and some of them even asked me whether I have studied medicine or not. But as flattering as the feedback could be, I still knew that I don't want to go through this grueling self-doubt process again. Somehow I needed to review what I know and to identify the gaps in the knowledge and to be better. And then I just saw NAATI has this test. This just afforded me this great opportunity to learn.
This is what I wanted.
To
Good
learn.
Timing, NAATI. Well done.
That's why I applied for this test and took the test. And I also thought if fortunately I could pass this test, it's an external, recognition. People better than me telling me you're fine, you're okay, would quiet down the imposter syndrome and better for my mental health. And that's why I took these tests. Yeah.
Oh, what an amazing story. And here we were thinking, when would you use your specialist credential between an expert and another expert? I teach at university and we set similar tasks, and I'm always thinking, when is a doctor ever going to talk with another doctor and I'm going to interpret? And I'm like, wow, well, it exactly is the scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, and I learned a lot, even though I was stressed out the whole time. Yeah.
Oh, good on you. Well, how did you prepare? I'm going to ask you the same question too, Sylvia. So prepare yourself. How did you prepare for the tests?
I actually put aside 3 months for the to prepare for this test, but it's not
for each test, because you've done legal and health.
I think maybe for both. But I was still working as interpreter in the community doing health and legal jobs. So what I did was I used the fragmented time during the day, like the time between jobs, to read on materials, to accumulate the knowledge. And at night, when I got home, if I wasn't that exhausted, I would do more studying, maybe 1 to 2 hours each night. Sometimes I felt too exhausted. I would, sit on the couch and watch some YouTube videos. There are so many good materials we can use, especially on YouTube and podcasts, designed for doctors. My goal at that time, preparing for this test was for example, for health, my goal was to be half of a medical student. If I could be half a medical student, maybe I can do this test, because they've gone through rigorous training through medical school, and also, the rotations and placements. So I thought if I could be half of student, I would be able to handle the knowledge part and the interpreting part of the tests. Yeah.
So what kind of resources did you use apart from, let's say, you said YouTube videos and podcasts, just so that, we can recommend some of these resources to our viewers who might want to sit this test? And you were doing your preparation in English and in Chinese as well, right?
Yes, I mainly got online and go to, for example, for medical tests, I used all the Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, those world renowned. They have a lot of very detailed information, like medical information and also legal ones. And I used some good with good reputation Chinese websites designed for doctors and medical students to try to accumulate the knowledge. And for podcasts, I used ABC's health report and also Zero to Finals designed for Surgery 101, mostly designed for medical students to practice. Yes.
Lynn, did you end up finding the test really challenging, or? not as challenging because you were so amazingly prepared?
I still find it quite challenging. But for the knowledge one, long answers, just as Vicky talked about, I think it's quite hard to answer. But I was quite confident, when, going in for the test.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I don't think...
for the legal one, the interpreting part, because I did it online, it stressed me out a little bit because I'm not really good with computers. And at that time, didn't really have any experience, doing simultaneous interpreting on these online platforms. So I was quite stressed out. Yeah.
The two tests, were the dates close to each other?
Not really, no.
Okay, so you were able to prep for one and then prep for the other one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, and in my case, I certainly waited for the results of the knowledge test before thinking about the interpreting test as well. So, in terms of the preparation, I was not as thorough as Lynn. I did not think that I was going to be a legal student.
I don't think anyone
that was amazing to hear.
I love that journey, that story.
To hear
Thanks
that process. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really made me think, even within the conference interpreting setting, the kind of effort that Lynn talked about in preparing for that 10-day job is exactly what you need to do when you go to specialized conferences. And it is extremely challenging, always knowing that we are not the experts in that field, whatever the field is, and that we generally need to work in various fields. So it means that each time we're engaging in a particular area, the work of that preparatory work is so important. And that's actually one of the reasons, and I know that this is not the question. The question is about preparation, and I will get to that. But it is one of the reasons why I was so excited, and one of the things that I think is actually so important about the certification system that was introduced from 2018 or from 2017, effectively, with effective dates of 2018. I feel that this certification system, which is particularly important for working within community settings, within the domestic space. So, if we leave that conference interpreting aside, all the other credentials are very much about working within the domestic space, but I feel that it is a system that actually recognizes the complexity of that domestic space. And that is exactly why specialization in legal and in health made total sense to me when it was recommended through that improvements in NAATI testing project. And I was thrilled to see that NAATI adopted those recommendations and actually put a really solid system together. Because whether we have the specialized credential or not, we have to work within those systems, and the level of preparation that is required to do a good job and actually provide the level of quality that is required in those highly complex settings is essential. So the fact that we now have a system that can actually recognize the work that I need to do, and that can differentiate as well between the people who want to put the work in and people who may not want to put the work in, I think is really important. They're important signals in terms of what does an interpreter who's gone through this space, what should we be able to demonstrate? So going to the preparation, for me, the start was very much the kind of resource that Vicky was referring to at the beginning. And it was, and this is what I ask colleagues who say to me, Silvia, when are we going to have specific training available for the specialization testing? And my response is, I don't know, but I can tell you what there is available and we should be looking at before asking any questions is the NAATI website. And that website is extremely clear in terms of what the test holds, and it also has practice material. So it's got sample material. In my case, I work in Spanish. The material that was in that. I can't even remember for the knowledge test whether at the time that I did it, if there was a sample knowledge test available or not. There is now one available. So I can't remember if I did a sample knowledge test, but I do remember that in having a look at the kind of areas that were going to be looked at, I then spent a fair bit of time in kind of doing a self-assessment of my own, what are my gaps going to be? And for me, I don't work in health settings generally. I have done some health interpreting, but I do focus my practice in the community space in legal interpreting, and that was a conscious choice that I made some time ago. So I haven't put in the effort to feel comfortable in providing the level of quality interpreting in the health setting. Where I work in legal settings, I particularly work in criminal settings. So in courtroom settings, generally in the criminal sphere. So in a way, the preparation, I was quite comfortable. I mean, it doesn't mean that I know everything by any means, but I know that that's where my knowledge has, where if that's where I work most of the time, then that's also where I feel most comfortable. So I needed to focus more on, for example, on contract law, on family law. So, it was really about going back to long-term resources as I build glossaries and so forth, starting from those, looking at specific areas and sort of continuing to work on glossaries and knowledge in areas that I don't generally work in. So I went over glossaries and sort of review material in the criminal area, but I was fairly confident that questions that came up that went to business, that went to system, whether it was in the Australian system or, those comparative kind of questions in terms of the knowledge that we need about the legal systems that our languages work within, that I would be okay within that. It was in the areas where I don't work in as much that I focused on, and I found that that was a good call for me. So that was in terms of the knowledge test. And then with the interpreter test, again, there's I knew the actual practice material, so the videos that were available, which were, for example, for the dialogic extract, I remember that the sample was in English and Mandarin, so I couldn't do it, it wasn't in English and Spanish. But in spite of that, it gave me the fact that I could use the dialogic extractions in English to really practice that very, the level of accuracy that you need at that pragmatic level when you're interpreting in a cross-examination. That was a really good idea of where I'd be going. And again, it's cross-examination. It was like, it wasn't an area that I really needed to focus on. Where I did need to focus on was on long consecutive, because it was through using the material that was available that I identified that, because when things, even within that legal context, when somebody starts running over and not cutting things down, yes, go into simultaneous, baby. So I tend to work a lot, in the short consecutive and the simultaneous constantly. Mm-hmm. So it's the significant long consecutive that we don't use as much, although we still need to. And initially I thought, is this relevant? Like, am I using this within legal settings? And actually I am, because particularly when we're interpreting at the witness stand, for example, you can't necessarily tell someone to cut it at the time that the interpreter needs it. So that's where our long consecutive skills need to come in. And seriously, where at this level, we need to be proving those skills as well. Same as sight translation, which is something that we use constantly, both in legal and health, I would say, yeah? Mm-hmm. So the preparation for me was very much focusing on what the information I had about what the test would be. And then, specific example, for example, in terms of the long consecutive, I think it's about a week before the test where you get the specific information on the brief in terms of what the scenario is going to be. And in one of them, it was an extempore judgment in blah, blah. And so I actually looked for judgments, for sentencing judgments, which appear, which are available publicly, looked for one of those, copied things into a Word document, chopped the thing into about 300 words, whatever the length of the long concept was meant to be, recorded it in English. I recorded it myself, didn't even bother anyone else, which is, you kind of think, well, you're kind of preparing on but even then, on recording that, I then listened. I then used that as input for me to practice that long consecutive in that specific area. And I can tell you, extremely, extremely helpful.
Well done, both of you. You have given us some amazing recommendations on how to prepare. Vicky, now we know the lovely ladies have been talking about some practice material on the NAATI website. What's happening there? I know initially there wasn't a lot, but there's quite a bit now. Can you elaborate on the NAATI website and how candidates can access some practice materials?
Yeah, so we do have sample test for the sample knowledge test, as well as sample interpreting task on NAATI's website. So as Silvia has mentioned, candidates can just jump onto NAATI's website and look at those sample materials and use whatever methods, draw on your personal experience, personal skills to prepare for the test. And also, I would like to emphasize one point as just to add on what Lynn and Silvia have said, based on their personal experience, actually, in terms of preparation, in terms of long-term preparation, it actually draws a lot on personal experience and personal knowledge from your practice. And in terms of short-term preparation, just like, say, 3 months before the test, I would second that the first bit, the good start is to go to NAATI's website to look at the candidate information, to get yourself familiar with all those test tasks and look at it again closer to the test date. And as Silvia has mentioned, use those sample materials to prepare. And also 1 week before the test, NAATI was emailed the interpreting briefs, which sets out the context as well as the scenarios for each task. And I'm not going into the details because Silvia has given us a lot of tips on how she prepared using the interpreting briefs. But I also want to point out that for one of those 4 tasks, interpreting tasks, actually on the day before the test, candidates will receive extra preparation material. So for the legal test, it's a case summary sheet. And for the health test, it's the patient summary sheet. So there's an extra preparation material to help candidates. So my recommendations will be make use of the preparation materials provided and fully utilize your research and preparation skills to prepare, drawing on your personal experience and from the practice.
Very good, thank you. And, I'm not meaning to do any product placement here or anything, but we've also got some really good practice and preparation material on our website, conversa.com.au, and we've worked with doctors and lawyers to design, develop and deliver these trainings. So, regarding healthcare, everything on the anatomy and physiology of body systems, as well as, all the different kind of diseases, medications, treatments, and so on. And same with the legal, there's a couple of courses there that focus on the Australian legal system and the Australian criminal legal system. So, without turning it into an ad, it'll be good for those preparing for this test to check out the website. And I'm sure that they're going to find some quite useful courses there as well.
And you do need to advertise it, Fatih. It is important for us all to know the resources available. And that's one area where this industry within Australia has improved a lot in the, just in the last few years, where there's actually access to really good professional development and training all the way through. So,
yeah, I think that's important. The more competition there is, the better the quality of the training is going to be. So, it's really good to see work being done in this space as well, not just by us, but also some other organisations. Oz is obviously one of the big ones, and other LSPs now getting into this space too. So more the merrier, I say, for the betterment of the industry.
Absolutely.
Vicky, are you aware of any universities or tertiary institutions providing training in these specialist settings?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because, we'll talk more about the pathways, I guess, towards the end. But, will you be able to get specialist level training at a TAFE or a university in Australia?
So there are NAATI endorsed qualifications. And again, on NAATI's website, you'll be able to see a list of the current available endorsed qualifications by language, location, institution, qualification, and the certification it would make you eligible for. In particular, you'll be able to see the required units that candidates need to complete to make them eligible for the specialist test. For example, a legal interpreting course, at which institution and things like that. So again, it's NAATI's website.
Very good. We'll have a look at that. When I did my master's, there weren't any of the specialist courses in my institution yet anyway. And NAATI, I think, gave the opportunity to go and study something in that field. So I did an Introduction to Law course. That was kind of like my pathway to specialization. And I learned so much in that course for 6 months. And I was there with law students. I think, compared to my interpreting courses, I was barely passing probably, but it was a very, very high level of law studies. And, I think I did all right at the end, but I did learn a lot through that course as well. So there are opportunities, I'm just trying to say, I guess, in tertiary institutions where you can go and pick elections from specialist areas that would also be useful in your preparations, I think. So my question now goes to both of you, Silvia and Lynn. Now that you're specialist interpreters, you're part of a very elite few practitioners out there. We're sure that the numbers will grow eventually. But right now, there is literally a handful of you. Are you getting more work in these areas? What's happening, Lynn?
I guess yes and no. Like for the LSPs I work with, some of them don't really focus on quality assurance, I have to say that. So even after I wrote to them and told them about the new credentials I have obtained, their attitude basically was just, they don't really care. So
good on you.
They are still like assigning like legal jobs to whoever is available, not based on who has the most experience. But for some LSPs I work with, they just immediately replied to me and updated my contract and increased my hourly rates.
Oh, magnificent. That's good to hear.
And I am charging more actually when lawyers found me on the NAATI directory and reach out to me, I am charging more. But apart from the financial side of things, actually, I think having these two new credentials open up my world a little bit. I'm having more like different experiences, like invited by different organizations to work with them to talk about. For example, I worked with one LSP to talk about professional conduct working at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And I talked to newly appointed magistrates, I think at the National Judicial Council, about how to work with interpreters. And also I had 4 sessions now, I think, with Queensland Health Metro North, one of the largest hospital and healthcare services, and talked with doctors, allied health practitioners, how to work with interpreters, and even administrative stuff like how to book, interpreters, things like that. So, and also one of the highlights of this experience is that I was invited to the AAT Sydney Registry and I saw Professor Sandra Hale in person. Oh my God, that's just the best day. I carried all of her books, on the flights, Professor Sandra Hill's books, but I was just too embarrassed to ask her to sign those books. But she was just sitting next to me.
Right? That would have been absolutely. That would have been.
She was just
That would have been lovely, particularly if you carried the books.
And also, like today, Silvia is just this undeniable force in the industry. Just I looked up to you this whole time, and I can be, today with all you guys. It's just an honor for me.
Well, I know it's the other way around, with the only person to actually have dared to do both specializations, which is just great, Lynn.
Thank you.
Really, really good.
It's so worthwhile, taking the time to prepare. Yeah.
Oh, magnificent. How about you, Silvia? What do you think? Now, we know that we said that you also work for Multicultural New South Wales as a PD coordinator, right? So,
as PD is one of the things that I do, but I don't coordinate all of the PD. Wonderful colleague Natasha Joe, who's also an interpreter, an Indonesian interpreter, is working on a more consistent basis with MNSW, and is coordinating that. But I am very lucky to, apart from being on their language services panel, so I worked with them as an interpreter and translator for a number of years. For about a year now, I've also been part of their office-based team, with the opportunity to participate in PD. I was actually delivering PD sessions before joining the office, so and I continue doing that. But I've had more of an opportunity to also work in terms of capacity building for both the large panel of interpreters and translators, but also internally in really, trying to bridge that gap between the office, which language service providers, I think all of them working in this space have got, there's no doubt that there is a challenge in terms of being able to meet the needs of interpreting in so many different languages with such a variety in terms of the availability as well of interpreters and translators. Not everyone, both, in the languages represented by, Lynn and I are both fortunate to be to work with languages that actually, where we do have postgraduate university qualifications available, where we do have a lot of background and literature, like much work that we can rely on. There are many other languages where, of course, there are excellent interpreters and translators as well. But as they become newer languages within our community, it's a lot more challenging for those people to actually have all of the resources that we do. So certainly, with language service providers that take that challenge seriously, don't just do put whatever interpreter to whatever job comes up. Yeah, exactly. But we'll take the time to institute systems where knowledge and skills can be, where that level of knowledge and skill can be known and can be considered in how the interpreter is matched with the job. And it should happen with translation as well.
I think there are also, sorry to cut you off, I think there are also language policies, state language policies, federal language policies where the job has to go to the highest certified.
And that's always the recommendation, and certainly documented all over the place, but it's the implementation of that that is very often questionable. So again, MNSW is one of the, or Multicultural New South Wales Language Services is one of the organisations that does have a policy that is actually operationalised through its job allocation system to make sure that the highest qualified interpreter is offered the job first. In terms of the work that is available. But there's, also significant investment in scholarship programs, for example, to bring programs that we work with NAATI very closely on to make sure to contribute to that growth of capacity in the languages that have growing demand and not as many interpreters and translators. So important work there. And look, and part of the sort of going back to is there more work? I think, like Lynn, the opening up of different types of opportunities certainly happens. So in my case as well, I've been along with colleague that I think we all know, with Angelo Bervoscio, who's currently the national president.
Hello to Angelo.
Hello to Angelo, indeed. Angelo is a lawyer. Before he's many things, but he was a lawyer before he was a translator, and is now completing his master's, actually, so extending into interpreting as well. But because of all those connections with the legal industry, he's invited me to participate with him in a whole range of professional development for lawyers on working with interpreters. And the reason that he invited me is because I am a certified specialist legal interpreter. It doesn't mean that I'm the only good interpreter out there or anything, but I am the one within my language group that's actually, assumed that challenge of proving that knowledge and skills through testing. And again, it doesn't mean that other people are not good by any means. But I think, we do, as a profession, have that challenge there in front of us, which is, if we agree that these are specialized areas that require ongoing work, then we have to take the step and use that, have that level of certification. And through that level of certification, there is a differentiation, but it's just a demonstration of what we have proved through testing, not just because I say that I can do it. I've had to demonstrate it through testing, and that's really important. So automatically, as a panelist within Multicultural New South Wales, I've gone up in the award scale. Because there was an award implemented in 2021, which actually aligned salary levels for interpreters and translators to level of certification, and automatically my pay has gone up. That's
great news. And it's not just the pay, it's not just the work in the related areas, but it's opened other doors for you, for both of you, especially looks like in the training area, and not just training interpreters, but actually training service providers, training doctors, training lawyers, training administration staff on how to work with interpreters. So, wow, first of all, congratulations, and then also thank you.
There's an issue of credibility as well. It's like, I won't just talk about being a certified interpreter, kind of focusing my practice here. I can just, the title of the certification shows that I'm not making that up. So there is an issue of credibility with this as well.
Definitely. Just a question that pops to my mind, Aurélie. Multicultural New South Wales has increased their pay, I guess maybe updated their awards for the specialist interpreter. Were LSPs advised beforehand saying, hey guys, there's a new credential coming, sort your stuff out. We'll be having potentially our first specialist interpreters joining your ranks very soon, and this is what's happening. Did you send out the news?
Well, yeah, that, the changes around the system were certainly communicated with a variety of stakeholders. And, as far as NAATI is concerned, we've always been really supportive of first encouraging LSPs and government agencies to always choose the highest level of certification among the pool of practitioners. So that's certainly something that has been advised in various forums. And, you can see that in different official guidelines, I can't remember right now. It's the
recommended national standards.
This one, but there's also another one. Actually, I have it here, the Australian Government Language Services Guidelines as well. So they are, a variety of bodies which recognize this, and that's certainly what we encourage. And so that's the first thing. The second thing that we strongly support is that the level of pay is commensurate to the level of certification. Yeah. So that's clearly what we would like to see out there consistently.
That's very good. I was only asking that because, when Lynn was saying, I wrote them a letter, I told them that, I'm now a specialist, and they're like, they didn't know. There's no excuse for an LSP to go, specialist interpreter, what's that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
and even if they were not aware of this, they can also check the NAATI website. They can contact NAATI, find out by themselves what it's all about, and have the right information to then take the relevant actions. Yep.
Silvia, you were saying something?
Yeah, that I think that there is a link with when Lynn was saying earlier on that the sense that she got is that many providers didn't actually care about quality. I agree with that, but I think I do, and I'm very critical of the way that that the kind of allocation of things and how the interpreting and translation things work within this community space in many areas. But I think it's really important to not only put the spotlight on the language service providers, but also put the spotlight on the users of the service. And that is primarily government.
Exactly.
And it is government that does language service guidelines, and then they have procurement policies that drive them to selecting the providers of interpreting and translation services based on price. And so that cannot surprise anyone when what happens is that interpreters and translators are paid, are paid in a manner that is unsustainable for someone. If you think about, the level of preparation that Lynn was talking about, that is unsustainable if you're going to be getting paid something that is just not going to recognize the level of effort required. So there is a thing about language service providers and how they do that. And the reason why I make, my preferred language, and even before I worked with them in the office, I actually stopped working with a whole range of other LSPs and concentrated my work through Multicultural New South Wales, because there is a decent award that actually means that there is an hourly rate where every hour that I spent engaged by them is reasonable compared to, at the national level, situations where the difference between a certified provisional interpreter and a certified interpreter might be about $5 in the first hour, and then there is no difference. With engagement practices that are just about who can set up the macro in their computer to accept the majority, the greatest number of jobs, rather than having a system that actually talks about supporting quality. And the government agencies that are contracting those services are doing nothing to ensure that quality is provided. So language service guidelines and policies can be a whole range of lip service unless specific operational policies are put in place to actually implement systems that result in good quality interpreting and translation. And the issue here is not just about what is my rate of pay, because frankly, I've worked in other industries and I can go and work in other industries. I do this because I want to. And that's why, I also fight to have conditions that I consider to be decent. But the reality is people can go and do other things. The issue is that if we don't get good quality interpreting and translation in this level, then this whole thing about wanting a cohesive society and wanting, and us being a country which works, which accepts multiple cultures and multiple languages becomes a lie. And that's as simple as it is.
We're always proud to say these things, especially, on TV. Our politicians always like to use multiculturalism. But you're right. I mean, if it's not in practice, what's the point?
Exactly. And, and there are, just like Multicultural New South Wales is a state government organisation, there are also national government organisations that I will not work with because the conditions are atrocious. And that's just inexcusable, absolutely inexcusable. And the fact that it can be, at the end of the day, it's my salary that is used as the point of competition between different language service providers to gain the very significant government contracts is shameful, is absolutely shameful. And that, in my mind, as a voter, is primarily the responsibility of government.
Indeed.
Primarily the responsibility of government in making sure that everybody has to compete on things other than the very basic wages that they pay to the people that have to deliver this very important service of enabling communication between English and whatever other language is in the Australian community. Not good enough. No. Not good enough.
Well said, Silvia. Thank you very much. Aurélie, just to wrap things up slowly, what languages are being offered at the moment for this test? We know Spanish and we know Mandarin.
Yes, at the moment we offer 6 languages at the specialist level, and that's for both health and legal. That includes Auslan. And we also have Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Spanish, and Arabic.
Very good. Any other languages that are coming up that you can maybe tell us a bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually information about this on the NAATI website. Everything's on the NAATI website.
I just want some groundbreaking news here for the podcast only. Everything's on the website.
Yeah. So the next one coming up will be Cantonese. As I've explained earlier on in the podcast, the process is extremely complex in terms of developing new tests and new languages. So we generally add 1 or 2 languages a year. And at the moment, we're only looking at Cantonese for the next financial year. And then we'll build from that. So it's really based on the demand we're aware of. It is generally quite low, and because the development is complex and costly as well, we need to assess the landscape before we start adding, say, 5-10 languages, which would take a lot of time anyway. So we target the languages where we anticipate to have the most demand. And so at the moment, the next one is Cantonese, but we do review that every year. So if we are aware of a new trend that there's increasing demand in a language we hadn't really planned, say, for the following year, we might review that and move it forward so we can make it available earlier than anticipated.
Magnificent, thank you. Now, just to give us a bit of an idea of the pathway, if you could please, Aurélie, who can apply? How can they apply? Is there a cost? How much is it?
Yeah, so for the pathway, there are 5 pathways for specialist tests. They are quite different. Look, the minimum qualification, the minimum training level that we require is a bachelor degree for those tests. So that's across all pathways, and also holding a certified interpreter credential. So these are like across all pathways. Then these pathways will be different on the type of qualifications that the candidate might have. If they can do, so pathway 1 will include doing an endorsed qualification, so NAATI endorsed qualifications. Vicky mentioned that the list of institutions is available on the NAATI website, so if candidates are looking for that kind of qualifications, they can find institutions there. They also have...
On that note, thanks to COVID now, you got a lot of TNI courses being offered online.
That's right.
So, what was not available in your state before is probably available now. So have a look at those institutions on the NAATI website.
Absolutely.
And you have many more options now.
Yeah, that's right. And so for that pathway 1, so they can do an endorsed qualification that is at bachelor degree, but also they need to have at least 2 years of interpreting experience in the language combination. So that's number 1. We get lots of candidates through this pathway. The second one is very similar, but it's the training is a non-NAATI endorsed qualification. So they might have done their qualification overseas or they might have gone through different institutions that is not NAATI endorsed. That's okay. We recognize that. And
it has to be a TNI program.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they would have, for both trainings I didn't mention, they need to have some units around the area of specialization as well. And they, regardless of the pathway, it has to be a bachelor level minimum. And then for those who haven't done a non-NAATI endorsed qualification, they will need to provide evidence of work practice for at least 4 years. So we're asking a bit more evidences of the work practice. Now, there are 3 other pathways. One of them is holding a specialist certification already. So like for Silvia, for instance, she would meet that requirement if she wanted to sit the specialist knowledge the specialist test, in another language. Then she would already be eligible because she already holds a specialist certification.
What about if she wanted to do health, specialist health?
That would have to be within the specialization. Vicky, you might want to confirm that.
So
but
if someone's
got to be within the test type.
Yeah, exactly. So if like for Silvia, who holds CSLI in Spanish, Silvia will be eligible for any other languages in the CSLI test.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, just want to clarify.
Yeah, so it's within the specialization. And then we've got two other pathways which have a bit more of a focus on the experience or the specialization knowledge. So pathway 4, in addition to having a certified interpreter credential, candidates need to provide evidences of at least 6 years of interpreting work. So we're going from NAATI endorsed qualification plus 2 years of experience to non-NAATI endorsed qualification plus 4 years of experience. And here, we're only looking at the experience, so we're asking for 6 years of interpreting work experience in the language combination and in the field of specialization. Plus, they need to have completed professional development. So we're looking at 50 hours of professional development activities that are related to the domain of specialization. And it can range over a number of years, up to 4 years, but we require those 50 hours. So this one has more of a focus on the work experience and a bit of PD around it. And the last pathway is, again, having a certified interpreter credential and demonstrating experience, interpreting work experience in the health domain for at least 4 years, on top of holding a health or a legal qualification. So it may not be in interpreting, but it is in the field of specialization at about bachelor degree level. So they may have a law degree at the bachelor level, which make them eligible in terms of the training they've completed. So looking more, as I said, at the area of specialization and the work experience. So I'm aware there are lots of details in what I've said.
That's very good. There's something there for everyone. You've
absolutely.
We thought of pretty, a number of different pathways to kind of, I guess, be open to quite a lot of people.
That's right, because at this level, we know the pool is relatively small at the moment. And so we are able to reach to a number of professionals who could work as interpreters at this level, but may not have followed the traditional training pathway, but there's still an avenue for them to become eligible to sit the test. Yeah.
Thanks. And how much does it cost?
Well, actually, the cost of the test is relatively low in comparison, perhaps, to other tests that we offer. So at the moment, the knowledge test, so that's for both specialization, the knowledge test is at $165 at the moment. And for the interpreting test, it's $187.
That's a bargain.
So it's relatively low. And look, we are aware of the financial pressures in the industry as well. So NAATI really endeavors to keep the test fees as low as possible. So it's attractive as well to candidates, and we can support the industry in having those higher credentials out there. Yeah.
Lynn and Silvia, did you tell your accountants to tax deduct that application fee? Does that work?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Of course. No, it is. There's no doubt. It is tax deductible. And if you set up as a sole trader or whatever it might be, then even the GST portion is something that you can look at. But I do think, when you add everything up, it adds up. But it is, I think, part of the realities of being within a profession. And I actually think that the fee structure makes sense. The most expensive, I would suggest, is actually the entry level. with the Certified Provisional Interpreter test, which is your first entry test. And once you have that, then the ongoing, so once you've entered the profession, then the ongoing certification expenditure, which would not be, it's not something that you're doing every 6 months, I think is actually quite sustainable, particularly if we have decent pay rates. That's what we've got to strive for.
Exactly.
Lynn, before I let you go, some tips for the candidates out there who are going to sit the test. What do you recommend?
I think Vicky just mentioned something I think very important. Apart from preparation, I think we can draw as interpreters a lot from our experiences, like working as interpreter, working different cases. And also, as Silvia pointed out, like from the court cases you have done, they are very good like reference points for you to actually to go from there to study. Myself, for legal, I do case law study. That's what I call, just as Silvia said, if it's a case I have just done, I will just go back home and read on some like precedents cases, like to read about judges' decisions, sentence hearings, things like that, to work on that. And if you have already accumulated, a certain amount of experience from working in the industry, working in a community setting, I think those are very good starting points to, go deeper and also to add on the things, the gaps you have identified to learn more, to expand on those things, if that helps.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. How about you, Silvia? Last minute tips?
Yeah, I think apart from what's been mentioned, it's also don't just get caught up on the knowledge. Think about, and I think that, ongoing the self-assessment work that we do is really important. So think about skills as well. Think about skills that you need to sharpen in order to, in order to continue working, but also to demonstrate the highest quality in a test situation. And don't worry about that. We'll try to find the ways to kind of calm down in terms of thinking about sitting a test, which is, different from demonstrating our knowledge and skills at work, really. So yeah,
that's a really good recommendation, because as practitioners, maybe people haven't been in school for such a long time, and even though they might be very experienced and very good interpreters, just that stress about sitting a test.
Yeah. So, and that does take a bit of kind of calming down about, but it's something that can be approached. With Lynn mentioned, I think, a good point about the online platform, the fact that there are opportunities to actually practice on the platform. For me, that's what sorted it. So I actually didn't have it. I did my interpreting test also online, and I'm going to be sitting the conference interpreter test, and I'll be doing that online as well. So I think, totally acknowledge the nervousness for colleagues who aren't as used to kind of liaising with the computer as part of that interpreting. So if you're one of those colleagues, just give yourself the time to practice. It's just a tool. That's what and look at Lynn. She did it online. She was really nervous about it. And here she is with both specialized credentials. So,
indeed. Well done. Well done. Another question very quickly comes to mind, Aurélie. The PD obligations for specialist interpreters, is it still the same as the other credentials?
Yeah, it's the same process for all credentials. So specialist interpreters will also have to recertify their credentials. So it's the same 3-year period. And they would have to engage in a number of activities to maintain their skills. And so that could be some specialized PD, obviously. But the same catalog applies to all practitioners. So there's a range of activities that can be done. But obviously, if you work at this high level, you would want to look for activities as well that can help you maintain your level of expertise. As Silvia mentioned very rightly, it's an ongoing professional development. You need to keep maintaining your learning and your knowledge in a variety of areas. So, yeah, absolutely.
Magnificent. And Vicky, as the specialist NAATI rep for the specialist interpreting candidates, any recommendations from you?
Well, again, I think go to NAATI's website. That's because you got all the information there.
Yep.
If you have any questions, don't be afraid, just reach out. I mean, we are here to help. And I think that's all from me.
And how can they reach you? Is it info@naati.com.au?
Yep, that's the preferred way. Yep.
All right, magnificent. And Aurélie, any tips from you?
Well, actually, I'll just build on what Vicky was just mentioning. And for those candidates who actually sit the test, to not be afraid of sharing their feedback as well, because we do listen and we do learn from those candidates' experiences. And we are always looking at improving what we do, be it in terms of the information we provide, our testing platforms or our test materials. So we're always very keen to hear about their experience. And so, yeah, we encourage that. So not so much a tip for the test, but more for after the test, and keep supporting the community and us in improving our tests. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, I just want to say thank you to all four of you today for taking the time, talking with us about NAATI's specialist credentials. I've been wanting to do this for a long time now, but I've finally gotten all of you together. Thank you so much for making the time. There was one other specialist interpreter that I wanted here today, Roxanne, who couldn't make it. The schedule just didn't line up. So would have been amazing to have you here, Roxanne, but maybe next time. So thank you. My lovely viewers and listeners, today I was with Aurélie Sheehan and Vicky Wong from NAATI, and Silvia Martinez and Lynn Geng, Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter Silvia, and Certified Specialist Health Interpreter and Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter Lynn. Thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information, knowledge, and your experiences with us today. And good luck to everyone who is going to sit the test. Aurélie, we've got some applications, right?
Yeah, they keep coming through. So, we're keeping an eye on what's coming. And yeah, we will have actually candidates in several of the languages that we are offering. So it's very exciting.
Very good. Maybe we'll have another one of these podcasts next year, get some new people on there and see how their experiences are as well. And I just want to also point out that, again, for preparation purposes, if you have a look at conversa.com.au, you'll find a lot of healthcare focused and legal interpreting focused courses there that you can use for preparation for the test. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.